Let's talk about how you arrange your training. The listeners are probably curious as well, as am I. Was that an upper lower still, or were you doing full body? Because I know you were doing the full body for a while as well. For the most part, you would consider it a full body, but you're not necessarily hitting things directly every single training, just to be clear. That's from what I remember from our last conversation.
Yeah, man.
So maybe you can touch on that and let the listeners know where you're at with that.
Yeah, it is essentially just a non-restricted split. I just distribute my training across 5 or 6 days and do so in a manner that allows me to hit my volume targets for everything. And there's a fair amount of auto-regulation this deep into prep based upon how I feel and knowing that I can do a little less if I need to maintain when I'm feeling like trash in the gym. So currently, like ideally, the way my training is split up, and it has changed over prep because I did do a powerlifting meet in June in the middle of prep, and I've been trying to maintain my powerlifting strength. I've been kind of slacking on getting in the big three in the last couple of weeks, I would say, especially with travel. Like it just wasn't conducive for me to bring squat shoes, a belt, and knee sleeves to California. So I got back after essentially 2.5 weeks of not doing the power lifts. Prior to that, though, I was trying to get at least one single in on squat, bench, and deadlift at a relatively high RPE, powerlifting style, just to maintain that strength, because I want to leave that as a competitive option on the table. But I'll be honest with you, Kenny, like I've been so motivated about bodybuilding, and I'm not making any big decisions in prep because, you know, your prep brain is hyper focused, right? Which I acknowledge, because I'm so close and I've seen these late stage improvements in my physique in my age and my training age, and being able to be a contender in most amateur shows I go in, it really motivates me to want to focus more on bodybuilding. So my split has changed a bit mid prep. So it's gone away from what I was doing previously, which I was doing upper body plus calves Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then I was getting in some additional work on my weak points and then powerlifting on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So like start with a single and then get in like lateral raises, a lat pull down, and maybe in some additional like back work or something like that. So we're talking 3 to 6 sets of back and delt work on those 3 days with a single and maybe 1 or 2 back off sets on squat or deadlift and bench, and then doing a full upper plus calves on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That was what I kind of landed on when I was done actively competing in powerlifting. Before that, it was a much more blended approach. So currently, as I've now been a slacker on the big three, it has gone more back to that full body approach. So there are some days that look more full body-esque if I do 1 or 2 leg movements on them, but there are some days where I just come in and I might just do calves or just do hamstring curls, and then effectively it's upper plus calves or upper plus lower body. So for example, last week I had a day where I did do leg press, deadlift, and calf raises. So that's like a lower body workout, right? But I also did lateral raises, you know? So, and that was a bit of an aberrant training session because I had to fly back from the States and I had missed one of my days. So I had to kind of truncate it. So the ideal split on paper right now is essentially it's an upper body day. I hit calves 3 times a week, and then I distribute across the week a leg extension, a leg press, a squat, an RDL or a deadlift, depending on upon how I'm feeling, a seated hamstring curl, and a weighted back extension. And those are all just 3 sets apiece. So I have 1 or 2 lower body movements, not counting calves, on each one of the days I train. And sometimes it might literally just be an isolation leg extension, leg curl. And I find not having leg days in prep is really good from a energy conservation standpoint, fatigue management standpoint. That day I did, where I did deadlifts, leg press, and calves on the same day, I was feeling that for like multiple days because I'm on, you know, like 1,500 calories and doing 12,000 steps. So I was like, all right, there's a reason I made this decision and found it to be better way back in 2018 and 2019, and I'm stuck with it. So that's kind of what the approach is now.
Nice. And you're also much more used to not doing as many leg exercises, if you will, in one given session. So maybe there's a training effect that you've been accustomed to the last little while based on that. Would you say like that could be an accurate way to describe it? Or do you think that even if you started training or like having full leg days, that you couldn't become accustomed to that and then almost adjust, if you will? But yeah, this is interesting to me.
I think if I didn't have periodic phases of doing strength sport training, I would perhaps be a little deconditioned to a bodybuilding leg day. But I just had a long power powerlifting, season too. So it's not uncommon at all for a powerlifting session to include 4 to 5 sets of squats and deadlifts, and then, accessory variations on those. And in 2019, my last contest prep, I was doing the same style, but then I immediately got into strongman training. So like I'm doing truck pulls and Atlas stones. So I'm pretty decently conditioned for the lower body sessions. I get acutely deconditioned when I do bodybuilding, which is kind of funny. You're doing more volume, higher reps, but I just don't need that much for my lower body. I find it's more counterproductive, but I'm not that out of shape from the powerlifting to be in a position where I'm getting fully like destroyed by a leg day. I think people underestimate the normal quote unquote amount of fatigue they are getting from a leg day when you come in and do squat, RDL, leg press, lunges, and calf raises. Like that is training 70% of the muscles in your body with a fair amount of overlap. And I remember just you power through that. And you're in the off season, you're in your 20s. And also the goal is to feel like you're trash when you're early in your career, Yeah, the next day you come in, you do shoulders and arms, right?
Yeah.
So you're like, you're fine. I did notice that when I started distributing my leg volume like this more across the week, the quality of my leg training improved and all of my weights went up on my lower body stuff. Because the leg press and lunges you do after squats and RDL, like you're running on a 90%, 80% battery. I think you can look at that whole session and be like, that was intense, man. But when you think about it from a efficiency and productivity standpoint, you're like, I could have done this better. Like I had a day where I came in and I did like an upper body pull workout, like on a legs push pull. That's like, it's easy and you're done in 45 minutes. You didn't want to just do some leg curls at the end and then the leg day, now it gets easier. I think there's just a lot to be said for not starting with a split and actually starting with what are my needs as an athlete in terms of my individual body parts, the amount of intensity, amount of volume I need to do for them. And not to like self-promote, but we created a whole course based upon that concept, what Alberto Nunez calls inside out programming. Instead of coming to the table and going, well, let me take a generic split and then shoehorn my needs into it, like a legs push pull or an upper lower. Why don't we start with what are my needs on a per body part volume basis, proximity to failure? What are the exercises I like to do, can do, have access to? And then how would I distribute that in the optimal way for recovery and overlap for each one of those based upon my schedule and my needs as an athlete? And then the split emerges from that rather than starting with something that could be, at least for a more advanced athlete, an unnecessary constraint to what might be better. So that is kind of the way I've been approaching it since 2018, figuring out what I need to do and then moving stuff around and plugging and playing until I get to what I think is optimal for me.
We spoke about that concept, if you will, as well, where you're basing it off of the individual. That can get tricky, I find. Sometimes even for advanced lifters, there's trial and error involved, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And to go back to what we were talking about with the full leg days, I remember doing like 90-minute leg days. Maybe you remember this because this was at the time I was working with you, or just prior maybe, where I was doing the Lane Norton power hypertrophy adaptive training. And I was 20 years old, 19, 20 years old. And I was having trouble recovering. I have the emails. I look back at them because sometimes I look back at our old emails for the recommendations that you gave me for fat loss because I still implement it now. It's like almost like a resource for me when I'm going through a fat loss phase or mini cut. But talk about value there, right? By the way. And I know things have advanced. Man. Yeah, I know things have advanced and evolved, but the principles are still there. So it's like I'm still implementing that and seeing great results. But the point is that I was having recovery issues at like 20. And I remember that's when we went down to 4 days per week and we made some adjustments. So I think that's funny that we were talking about full leg days because, yeah, even imagine I was 20 years old and I couldn't handle the 5 days per week power hypertrophy adaptive training, the Lane Norton sample split that was put up on, I believe it was like Simply Shredded, the interview. And I remember just trying to fit myself into that split without any real understanding for the process of progression towards maybe work capacity and all these things that need to be considered when jumping into a split first and foremost, but also needs, like you mentioned, like what's the goal? If you're just jumping into a push-pull legs and you maybe do need to prioritize something that's not on the forefront of that split, like if you're just prioritizing compound lifts, your chest, shoulders, or your back, and maybe your arms are getting put on the back burner, well, maybe now it's like, well, let's play with what you're saying, right? So that's interesting though.
Yeah, man, it's important to point out that fitting yourself into one of the existing splits and templates that are out there and starting with a reasonable approach is appropriate for 95% of people interested in bodybuilding. So, I mean, I always need that caveat out there. Like my books are not going to be the bodybuilding program design course that we have in the 3DMJ Vault. They're going to say like, hey, try an upper lower because that is where most people are at. And even the minority of people who've been lifting for 10, 15 years are trying trying to maximize their physique to the point of a competitive bodybuilder. It is a niche topic, but if we're talking about getting on stage in a Speedo to try to earn professional status in competitive dieting, that's when you have to actually start thinking about this stuff. And when you're 19 years deep in the game, right, and you're 40 and you're trying to eke out marginal progress, if you want to see substantial progress, you have to be more specific. It's actually similar to strength conditioning. You know, when you have someone who is trying to move from 5th place to being podium, there's a very small difference between running a 9.8 and a 9.76, but there's a huge amount of specific directed work that'll get you there. And that very small absolute difference makes a huge relative difference. You know, running a 10 flat and a 9.9 is different between the Olympic trials and actually going to the Olympics.
Right.
But it's a no difference, right? It's like, how do we even count that? And I think sometimes you get these narratives of like, oh, you're done growing after 5 years, and you know, you make 90% of your progress in the first 3 years of training. But we value the last 10 or 20% of someone's progress moving towards their peak potential more than we value the first 80%, because that's when you really start to look different than other people. You know, you might have only put on 5 pounds, but now you're getting fake natty accusations. You know, like that's the kind of thing where you're shifting outside of the bell curve of normal of what people are expecting or think you could or should have the capacity to look like, or you can make very targeted changes. Like you said, getting substantially leaner can move someone who is a 5th place physique to winning a show in competitive natural bodybuilding if they're able to preserve their muscle. And doing things like bringing up glaring weaknesses is a similar level of impact competitively.
So auto-regulation is simply a tool where you're using this to self-regulate those outcomes. And this can be really helpful in the modern internet age, where even if you do have a coach, the program they give you is a piece of paper or a Google sheet. You know, you're printing it out or you're looking at it online, and you have to make some decisions on the fly without their guidance. They're not typically going to be on a Skype call with you for every set and every rep. And the most common auto-regulation tool that people are most aware of